this quote is going to be up on the board, and it's going to say, "No one can make me feel badly about myself unless I let them," from Eleanor Roosevelt. So as students are sitting down, they'll see this picture, and it doesn't say emotional abuse on the first slide, but hopefully they'll start thinking of what the lesson will be about. And here is the first part. So emotional abuse in relationships. So all these questions are going to be discussed with all the students. And just knowing my students, I feel like will really help before I even teach this lesson. Because if you know that some students may be in abusive relationships, even at home, not just with a boyfriend or girlfriend, even just with amongst family members, this could be a really touchy subject. So I feel like knowing your students very well will help. So if students aren't comfortable discussing out loud, obviously they don't have to raise their hand, but these questions are going to be up on the board. So have you ever felt hurt by someone or something someone has did to you? And how did you handle it? Did you feel that you deserved it? Did you let that person know how it affected you? And how might this look in a relationship if one partner feels the need to hurt the other person emotionally? So this will be discussed as just an opening to kind of get into it all. Next. What is emotional abuse? So this will be up as I teach the students what it is. So did it ever get physical? And while emotional abuse does not always lead to physical abuse in relationships usually always have emotional abuse next to it. So emotional abuse is a very abusive behavior that isn't physical. So it could be aggression, it could be manipulation, humiliating you. And usually this is like a pattern. It doesn't just happen once. And this could really lead to PTSD and anxiety, depression, just negative thoughts. And like I said, it's usually not a one-time event. And I really like this. This was on the last PowerPoint slide. Not all wounds are visible. And I feel like that's really important for students to realize. And this is the truth or myth slide. So there's going to be, once I click this, there's going to be a bunch of like scenarios or statistics, and the students will raise their hand and they can say if it's truth or myth. So I have all the answers up coming on this slide, but obviously the answers won't be up until the end of this slide. So this is a myth. Students wouldn't see the myth part. So abuse is a heterosexual thing and is rare in lesbian and gay relationships. When this does happen, the physically larger one is always the abuser. And this is false. Actually, emotional abuse it happens more in actually lesbian and gay relationships statistically, which is something I learned. This is a myth also. So victims exaggerate the level of abuse. If it really was that bad, they'd leave. That is not true whatsoever. And it takes two to tango. Abuse in relationships is usually caused by both people. And that's a myth also. So on the left side right here, the signs of emotional abuse, while we're going through this, the students could look at these little sayings on the side, and your boundaries don't matter. Nothing you say or do is good enough. Just these little things, students could realize in their mind what emotional abuse could look like. And on this slide, I really like this picture. I feel like it's very powerful on the side. And I will tell students as we have this slide up, I'll tell them, if you're comfortable, everyone close your eyes. Now try to picture a scene of emotional abuse, like someone whose self-identity has been like destroyed. So can you see it? So students will have their eyes closed if they're comfortable. And if you can see it, what does it look like? But chances are your mind doesn't even know where to begin. And usually emotional abuse, you can't see. It's not on the outside. It's a lot on the inside. And damaged people who are in these kinds of relationships could hide it very well. So if you can picture someone like this or a scenario, how can you put that image into words? So this will bring a discussion with the class as well. And I feel like it's very hard to picture if you haven't been in an emotional abusive relationship. So I feel like in this topic of emotional abuse, gaslighting is an important vocabulary word that I never even learned in high school. So I feel like it's very important to put this in the lesson. So, what is gaslighting? So, gaslighting is kind of like mind games. So, this type of abuse causes the victim, whoever's being abused, to question their own perception of reality. So, whatever the abuser is saying to them, they actually start believing it. And this gives the abuser like they feel like in control. So it makes it much harder for the victim to leave. So all these 6 parts on the right, the picture, it just shows their actions don't match their words. They're telling you you're wrong, you're crazy, you're imagining things. And this, I feel like, is just as important. So, how to respond to gaslighting. So, now you know what this is. So, these are just some things that you typically want to do, but it's very hard to leave relationships like this. So, if you continue to speak to me like this, I'm not engaging, I'm stepping away from this conversation. Of course, you want to respond that way, but it could be very hard. So, even just practicing and even just realizing that these are positive ways to react to a gaslighter is very important. So here is the cycle. And there's so many different visual cycle pictures online on Google. I feel like this one really showed a lot. So why might emotional abuse be more damaging than physical abuse? So as you can see, this cycle is split up into a bunch of different sections. So you could be abused economically, someone's taking your money, or your partner or even your family might be using their male privilege over you as a woman. It could be intimidation, any of that, using isolation so you can't even hang out with your friends or family. People don't see this. This is hidden. This is all inside your mind and all your emotions and stuff, all inside. So, this is why this abuse could be much more damaging. And why might you feel the need to emotionally or psychologically abuse someone that you supposedly care about? And this just comes back to down to the abuser wanting power and control over you. It does not always have to be a male and say their girlfriend. It could even be your father to you or your mother to you. It could happen at any age also. So just keep that in mind that this cycle is very hard to leave. And getting more into detail about emotional abuse, there's 6 types. So they're going to be numbered, and the students are going to see what kinds of types of emotional abuse there are. So rejecting, so that's being like kicked out of the house or someone's calling you names. Ignoring, that is just when someone just totally shuts you out. That could do so much damage on you emotionally. 3 is terrorizing, just unpredictable behavior, threatening, just always bothering and teasing. Isolating, so that was in the power and control wheel. So no social life and staying away from society. Corrupting, so that's just encouraging unethical behavior. And then lastly, there's exploiting, so just forcing and just unreasonable expectations. And I put the little girl on the right because, as you could see, just keep in mind that emotional abuse could even happen to younger kids. Red flags. So, can you think of any red flags of an emotional abusive relationship? So, I'll have students think of a red flag, and each student, if they're comfortable, could come up to the board and write it on the board, and we will have a whole list at the end. So, this is the point in class where I will hand out the red flag worksheet, and it will look like this. This will be printed out, and this just gives red flags for abusive relationships. So students could just look this over after we all discussed all the red flags that were on the board. And Ideally, what was on the board can match up to some of these, and students could keep this just for their knowledge. And back to the slideshow. So after the red flags and discussion, everyone comes up to the board. This is recognize the emotional abuse in these clips. So I have a YouTube video I'll click on. And these are just some text messages of someone emotionally abusing their girlfriend. And this, I will have a worksheet. I will show you the worksheet right now, actually. Let me just bring it up. And the worksheet that will be handed out also will be this worksheet. So the emotional abuse worksheet. So from the text messages that were just up, the students will have at least one example from the two texts, and they could use their red flag handout examples for help. And from the short clip, name 5 red flags that occurred that you saw. So let me pull up that video really quick. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this is a Jersey Shore episode, and I feel like a lot of people our age know that they were known for fighting. And it's just a short clip of just a bunch, well, them fighting, and Ronnie, in this scenario, it's a boyfriend and girlfriend. Ronnie is yelling at Sam, Sam's going back at him, and there are more than 5 red flags and emotional abusive scenarios in this video. So we'll just run through it. I'm done with. So as you could see, it's they blurred out a bunch of the curse words, but you could see that this fight gets very intense. So students could list those 5 examples as well on that worksheet. Going back to this, now we are going to go over some questions. So these questions that are going to pop up, there's going to be more. When I have it in the class, we're going to raise our hand and we're just going to try and guess the statistics. So like number 7 right here is underlined. That won't be there until the end. So on average, a woman will make 7 attempts to leave an abuser. Each year, over 10 million Americans are subjected to physical or psychological abuse. 1 in 4 women and then 1 in 7 men will be abused by an intimate partner. Friends and family may identify an abuser before the woman does. True. So students will say true, you'll say true or false. An abuser never apologizes. That is false. So that will bring a discussion with the class. Also, this is actually up to date right now with what is going on. And these are the statistics all on the side that the students could look at. And I will bring up the topic, how do you think COVID and the pandemic affects abuse right now? So do you think it goes higher up? Why do you think this is happening? So that is a big topic and something serious that has been going on. Statistics show that actually COVID has made abuse and everything go at a higher rate. And why don't people leave relationships in situations like this? So here's just some reasons. Some reasons why. There's the cycle of abuse that we all went over before. Fear how others will react. You share a life together, you just don't want to leave everything. They feel very personally responsible for their partner or their behavior. They just don't want to break up. And emotional abuse really destroys your self-esteem. So they just don't want to leave. They feel like it's impossible to start fresh. And there's many more, which students could discuss as well with the teacher if anything comes up. And the best way to protect yourself if you're in an abusive relationship is to create a safety plan. So there's My App Plan. There's actually an app that, as a class, if students want to see more into it, I could bring up a link. And the My Plan app just really helps you create a safety plan.